Phil, it is really hot, and
It's a bit warm.
I don't know if I've recovered yet from the weekend. I found myself on Sunday. Obviously, you were busy, putting together the new 4020 magazine, which people can see at the bottom of the screen. Oh, it's over this side. I mean, I'm pointing. You can't see it, but the viewers can. I'm just trying to work it. There it is. Oh, God, my hand's massive, isn't it? It's there. there. Oh, forget it. On Sunday, I was so tired. I started watching the Formula One, which I don't think I've done for about 20 years. And then I flicked over to the cricket, and it was full of people I don't like, so I turned that over. And I found myself for about half an hour watching the Welsh language soap opera Probably Come. And I had no idea what was going on, because obviously they're all speaking Welsh, so there were subtitles on. And the week has got even worse, because I went to the newsagents this morning, because they still exist. And I bought last week's League Express. So I've no idea what's gone on in the world of rugby league.
Well, more what's been called off in the world of rugby league. But let's not start on a negative.
Let's start on a positive, because we were at Wembley, Phil, on Saturday. This is 4020 Live, by the way. And it was a wonderful day and a wonderful pair of finals. Let's start with the 1895 final, which was in its rightful position of curtain raiser, which meant people were actually there, and a superb win for Featherstone Rovers in a very entertaining game.
I think it was a joyous and reinvigorating weekend, and that isn't just you taking me to Burger King. I can't praise highly enough the four teams and all the fans that were down there. We had no right to expect what we did. To those who watched it on the telly, we think that the pitch side temperatures were somewhere around about 100 degrees. And when you think that Featherstone York kicked off at midday, which would be the highest point of that temperature, when you add into the fact that as we drove down to that there down south, we didn't even know if the game was on until 9 o'clock when it was officially confirmed. And both teams went through a ridiculous amount of self-sacrifice to get the game on, and to put on a spectacle that they did. Finish 41-34 to Featherstone, but at one point in the second half it was 20-all and could have gone either way. Was magical, absolutely sensational. Cannot praise them enough. I think there were endless stories coming out of the game, and I'm sure people will appreciate that being the media at Wembley at the moment, it is not what it's always been. We can't just nip down and have a chat with players as we'd love to do and get all those stories and reactions in the best way you can. But as they started to emerge, players who'd only come down on the morning of the game went on to be man of the match. Players who had driven back up on Friday night to be with their wives who'd gone into labour, back down again to play in the game and straight back up for the birth of their second child. And some of those stories in 4020, which is why I haven't named those two players. Just so you've got something to read. York as well, having to take Mikey Lewis back at very short notice because they had a half-back crisis. The fact that the very last try of the game was a 90-metre interception. When, to be honest, I couldn't have even run 90 metres to an ice cream van if it had turned up at that point. It was just brilliant. Featherstone were outstanding. Just had a bit too much all over the field for York. But I think we've spoken many times before, and I'm sure our good listeners have probably heard it till they're blue in the face. But there's something about this 1895 Cup done right. We spoke to a couple of Featherstone fans on our way in, and one of them said, I honestly never thought I would witness a day like this with my club playing at Wembley. And people are realistic enough to realise that this goal of you have to do it through getting promotion into Super League may not be the only way, may not even be the best way. And that if clubs like York, who hadn't been at Wembley since 1931, we saw quite a lot of their fans who were wearing vintage replica shirts, looked fantastic. The Featherstone fans who made up the majority of the atmosphere in the stadium when the game kicked off, because I think there were probably double the amount of them there. Brilliant. I honestly, I cannot speak to a high level. We got virtually a point a minute, and I loved every single one of them.
Swinton were one of the semi-finalists, weren't they? No, we're going back months and months now. They ain't going up into Super League anytime soon. This is the only chance they're ever going to get of going to Wembley. You know, it's a great competition. It's in a great place now. The first year when they put it on after the final, I know that was logistics. They couldn't do anything about it. It wasn't as good. At least this year, people would come in as the game was going on if they're supporting Saints or Castleford, and could enjoy the closing stages of an exciting game, which Featherstone were, York dragged back into it for various reasons at the early part of the second half. We don't criticise referees on this programme. However, I'm still not sure how that was given us a try, but never mind, because it didn't affect the result in the end, which is the most important thing. Featherstone get to go back. I don't know if they're going to do an open-top bus tour like Saints did just to spoil the result of the men's final. But, you know, they've got all the right to do so. You know, they've just re-established or established a link with the local junior club, Featherstone Lions, a local amateur club, I should say, community club, get the right phrasing, where obviously two of their players came from in Hardcastle and Gale. So that's obviously, and that's in this post Elite Academy debacle era, it's important that clubs like Featherstone, who probably haven't got the resource to run their own academy, do have established links with major amateur stroke community clubs in their area who can provide talent for them, as they have done with those two. So all around, it was good. It was a good final. The best team won on the day. You worry about York going forward. I mean, you should talk about York now, because they've got some big games coming forward, because they're at the bottom end of the table. We mentioned last week Oldham resurgence possibly under Brian McDermott. We don't know yet, because they've only played one game, and they played Bradford, who are obviously a top side. But some big games to come for James Ford and his squad of, which some unkindly referred to as Dad's Army at the start of the year. But they've got to come good now, because they're under pressure.
Well, yeah, possibly under pressure. I think there'll be the pressure to just move away from the bottom of the table. I don't think at this stage, the way the season's gone, there's a realistic hope that they can hit the playoffs. And I think just going back to what you were saying about Featherstone and why it's so important for a pathway to be established. I mean, I can't imagine what Jacob Doyle would have felt waking up, Sunday morning, realising that he'd scored 2 tries at Wembley. I think that might have been his 4th game. And then you look at his teammate, Joe Summers, who makes his debut at Wembley. I mean, how many players can say we made our debut at Wembley? I mean, I know Kevin Dick made his Challenge Cup debut final in 1977 in tragic circumstances, but fancy launching your professional career at Wembley. And I just think for a club like Featherstone, in some respects, that's as if not more important than aspiring to be somewhere where, if the same were to happen to them that seems to be happening to Lee this year, in the longer run wouldn't do them a huge amount of benefit, which is not to deny them the opportunity if that's the way the system works. But I just think we saw something different in the 1895, a different route for championship clubs or part-time clubs to remain absolutely sustainable. I know York's ambitions are slightly different, and we'll talk about their women, no doubt, but they had a fantastic result last night, which was it last night?
Yeah, yes, it was. Monday night. It was.
Because unfortunately, I don't know what day of the week it is. But if you add in what they're doing on the women's side with the new stadium, they've got the chance really to appeal to a new. I mean, I don't know who York will have taken as guests to that game on Saturday, but to be able to ring up a corporate sponsor and say, would you like to be our guest at Wembley, and to see the team perform heroically but not quite well enough, I'm driving back from that going, and who do you want the next cheque made out to? You've got a foundation, you're building a women's team, you're part of York St John's University, so again you're linking back into higher education, the community that you come from. Where do I sign up to be part of this? And sometimes it is. I mean, we are undoubtedly we'll talk about the state that Super League is currently in, and it's going to be another week where we probably have more games called off than we see, and we're reaching a critical point on the integrity of the season. But when you look at, I'm going to use this as an example, and people say, well, he would, wouldn't he? Leeds published their accounts last week. And we know, whether people like it or not, that with the access to the facilities that they've got, with the corporate work that they can do outside of rugby league, that probably they are, in terms of economics, the biggest club in the sport. They lost 1.25 million on the back of losing over $1 million last year. They're projecting losing 1.25 million again next year. Now, I get that what builds their business is perhaps not the same as other clubs, but when the one that is the biggest in terms of economics is struggling in that way, why would you want to throw a York or a Featherstone into that environment when they can play at a level whereby if they get days out at Wembley, if they get grand finals of their own accord with kudos, a trophy and money attached to it, that is another way. And I thought, coming back on Sunday night, Saturday night, that one of the real positives to come out of the 1895 Cup was that it does show that these clubs can operate on the basis of sustainability in their own right. If they then want to become a full-time operation and play at the bigger table, that's fine. But it shouldn't be determined solely by how they do over the course of a season. And I don't know how many people watched it on the red button, but if you get the chance to see it again, I'd watch it because it was heroic. It was brilliant. It was wonderful. It was all that's best about Championship Rugby League, which doesn't, of course, mean that automatically we'll get a television deal on the back of that.
Yeah, see, halfway through the game, people say, "No, it shows you how entertaining the Championship can be," and I hope other broadcasters are watching. The problem is, the entertainment level doesn't matter. If you watch football and if you watch the Euros, lots of football is actually rubbish. It's not very entertaining, but the reality is people want to watch it. So whether we're talking about the Premier League, which is obviously great, and,
although it does have its crap games.
It does, yeah. Millions of people want to see Burnley versus Brighton, just to upset all the Burnley fans watching. But, people still want to watch games in it's called the National League now, not the Conference, as they always call it. And that's got a TV deal because people want to see those games. If there was the wider public interest in the Championship, it would be on TV. It's as simple as that. I always use ice hockey as an example. And you compare the media coverage. Very rarely is there a news story out there on BBC Sport, for instance, about actual games. The last two stories have been the guy who was tragically killed the other week and a player who's come out as gay yesterday. But there's nothing about actual matches because they're not interesting enough to people, but human interest stories are. We need to create stars. I tweeted this yesterday. We need to create stars, whether they're in Super League, the Championship, Women's Super League, League One, PDRL, LDRL, Wheelchair Rugby League, whatever. And we need to create stars based on their actual talent, because human interest stories only go so far. It's all right, this story now about the NHL player who's come out as gay, but are people going to watch ice hockey because of that? No, it's just a story. We've got to stop catering to Take a Break magazine readers. We actually need people who actually will put bums on seats, not necessarily in stadiums, but will pay Sky to watch our product, or whichever broadcaster, our league, pay a fiver to watch West Wales versus Coventry or whatever. Because we need to sell stars. People want to see celebrities. That's why TV is full of utter rubbish formats with celebrities put on there. Cooking with the Stars, which is MasterChef without Greg Wallace and with a lot of adverts from Marks and Spencer. Johnny Vegas is on there. God bless him. He's the only one, we've heard of. But it's full of vapid celebrities. We haven't got enough vapid celebrities in rugby league, or we haven't created them yet. So we need to do it.
Well, you see, there's another very good point here, which will link into the Challenge Cup final and something that we spoke about again on the way home. To create celebrities, to get people's names known, we need to know what they've done. So let's talk about the voting for the Lance Todd Trophy. They are collected at 70 minutes. So at that point, the game is still in the balance. You don't get any access to information about any of the players who have played. It's It's literally whilst you are working, you're also trying to evaluate what everybody's done. Now, no, not looking for any degree of sympathy or understanding with working. We're very, very fortunate and privileged to do that. But what you tend to see is attack. You don't have the ability to focus on defence. So unless somebody makes 3 tackles in a row, you're not going to see their contribution. Ignatius Parsi had a fantastic impact off the bench because he was bulldozing people. But I couldn't tell you how many tackles James Roby had made. So I think to create stars, you need as much information as possible. One of the things we needed at that 70-minute mark was the total overall impact any player had made on that game. And if James Roby was going to play the 80 minutes, which of course we didn't know if he was coming off or not, if he was going to make 50 tackles, which we didn't know at the time, all of that information, which clearly the BBC had access to and were filtering out a little bit to those watching at home, should have been down to the press box to enable us to make an even more informed opinion. I think I probably still would have gone with Evalds, because every time he touched the ball, he created havoc. He scored one of the best tries we've ever seen at Wembley. And as I say, I don't know why we vote at 70 minutes. You'd have thought with the technology we've got, you didn't have to write your name on a piece of paper anymore. You could have done it on your phone, just as the hooter went, and could have been collated that way. But we only get partial pictures. If at the end of that game, we'd have got the stats and we could have said how amazing James Roby, 80 minutes, 40 tackles, how fantastic that even on a losing side, Paul McShane, his opposite number, highest tackles in the game, 85, whatever it might have been. That's how you build stars. That additional information is, if we'd been able to say, X made 178 meters or whatever it was in that heat and ran at a speed of 33 miles an hour, or what? Do you know what I mean? Whatever it might have been. That's the additional information that makes stars. And we talked about this before, but it became absolutely apparent when people said, how could you possibly not vote for James Roby? We didn't have the information to be able to make that value judgment. So, yeah, I think you're right. Stars, facts, stats, ridiculous performances, they sell. That and Louis McCarthy Scarsburg swearing, clearly. That sells.
Yeah, Jake Mamo wasn't playing, so he couldn't get the award. He may do next year, of course, for Castleford. There's some interesting votes, though. Interesting names given votes further down the list. Usually these things tend to be either one horse race in the case of Danny Maguire in the grand final in 2017, or at least a couple horse race. Last year it was between Gale and Myler, wasn't it? I think because I was voting remotely last year, I voted Myler.
Well, I think Evalds was in the mix as well last year,
and a lot of people seem to think Gale should have won it last year because he dropped a goal. Because I thought he was fairly anonymous for the rest of the match, but that's not a criticism of Luke Gale. His team won the final last year. Just I thought Myler had the bigger impact on the game over the 80 minutes, but that's irrelevant. I voted for Evalds as well. It's you can't give it to the public to vote on either, because it'll just turn out to be, if you had a final between, say, Wigan and Wakefield, it'll just be a Wigan player wins, regardless of whether they win 50-0 or lose 50-0, because it's the public in their numbers will vote for their favourite player on their favourite team, because you can't be trusted with anything. As we've seen many occasions on Try of the Week, which just gets given to whoever puts the best social media campaign together.
Well, I think the other player who probably didn't get the public recognition he deserved, which you didn't really see until you got all the stats in after the game. Lachlan Coote probably was also a really influential player, not just with his goal kicking, but the tackle that he made on Evalds when he broke through, the calmness, the assuredness. I think, again, when I haven't got the stats in front of me, but I think he made a lot of meters in searing heat. All of that, I think, to get a balanced view of what happened, you have to have access to that information. And these days, there is no excuse why you can't.
Certainly not, especially when it's probably on bookies' websites everywhere. Well, some of the information will be anyway. But overall, it was a good final. Castleford, better team in the first half. Then St Helens either woke up or just dominated that final 40 minutes and were worthy winners of the Challenge Cup and had their parade and everything. You can't say it was a bad final, I don't think, this time around.
Oh, I mean, you say it's a good game. I would say it was an absolutely outstanding game. I think that's a game that we didn't have any right to expect when you know how hot it was there, and we were in the shade. The fact that so many players towards the end were going down with cramp just tells you the amount of effort that they put into that. Must have burned all the salt in their bodies. Cass were superb for 30 minutes in the first half. I mean, Saints sort of dominated the first, probably 8-9 minutes, and then got a fortunate try. I think what we have to say is that, the reactions of Theo Farge were fantastic. And when we heard then that he'd gone off at half time because he was having problems with feeling in his hands, and part of that is down to the fact that apparently he might have had a reaction to some painkilling drugs, but also he played with a fractured shoulder. I think that would affect your feeling in your hands, to be fair. To regather the ball low down and score was a phenomenal achievement. But Cass were fantastic, hit back absolutely brilliantly to the half time. Looked as though probably they needed the first score after half time. If they'd have got it, that might have been enough for them. The first score after half time was a contentious one, but I'm not sure that was the game-changing one. Clearly, it psychologically makes a difference when your coach tells you coming out of the dressing room, you need to get back into this game quickly, and within a minute you have, and everybody's looking around going, should that have been a try or not? It was the next try, 6 minutes later, I think, that turned the game, and that was down to quite wonderful piece of anticipation from Jack Welsby to realise that he could crab across the field and create an overlap out of nothing. And Welsby and Parsi off the bench in that second half, I think, were the difference. No matter what Cass threw at Saints, it was an absolutely ultra professional display in that second 40 minutes. It was a winning display. They still showed glimpses of a great football. Certainly the Makinson try, the manner in which was created and finished was superb. But they didn't shut the game down. They just made sure that Cass got absolutely no opportunities. And I think that is the Christian Wolf St Helens, that there was absolutely no doubt that when we got to the point of it, those minutes that start to matter around the hour mark, that the defence stepped up and said, right, Cass, you got to find a way through us because we're giving you nothing. And that defensive intensity never relented in that heat, and that's why it was a brilliant performance, a fantastic game. I would say one of the best finals we've seen at the new, if not the best.
But people will be happy, and we said this on the way back, because in the or won't rate it as highly because I think the result wasn't in doubt in the final 10-15 minutes. But that doesn't mean it was a bad game, or not a great game, or not a good game. St Helens proving why they are the top team at the moment, and I say that with a caveat that they're not top of Super League, of course. Whether they're the greatest Saints team ever or in the Super League era or whatever, I don't think they're the best team in the Super League era, because Leeds' decade of dominance, and I say this, that Leeds' decade of dominance puts them above this St Helens team, because they've done it for 3 years and they've done it for 10 yet. Lachlan Coote leaving is a good thing for St Helens. I know some people are upset about it, but it means Jack Welsby will probably play more, and he's a very exciting talent. He's the kind of person perhaps who could make into some kind of superstar. It's going to be interesting to see how Saints evolve. But
well, I think there's big change at Saints. Clearly, some of that is salary cap related, and you're absolutely right. The Lachlan Coote signing is perfect for both parties. It enables him to leave at the very top with Saints, in the knowledge that the guy coming in behind him is just a really special talent. To win a grand final in the manner that he did, and now to have a major influence on a Challenge Cup final, and not even yet be guaranteed a starting place every week, just shows you that they had to find some way of getting into that lineup. I think, again, you look at Kyle Amor, who scored the last try. There's a chance that he might not be at St Helens. We know that James Bentley is leaving. Theo Farge apparently is leaving. Kevin Aguama may not be offered a new contract. They've got Lewis Dodds, who couldn't even get into this 17 that everybody is telling us is, one of the great young talents in the sport. So they will evolve. And I think that was what was important to them as a group. We talked about the Darryl Powell story last week, and it was an important motivation for Cass, because that 80 minutes was a legacy for an era, not just for a season. But for Saints, I think their motivation, talking to a couple of them afterwards, was that they knew this group was the last opportunity. And they wanted to put a landmark on the fact that it was 13 years since they'd last won it. And, let's talk about how good James Roby is. He scored 13 years ago, still going again. Ridiculous, absolutely, amazing. But the majority of that team had never won a Challenge Cup with a Saints shirt on, so it meant a lot to them. I did get the chance to have a little chat with Forty20 columnist El McCarthy Scarsbrook of the London Parish, and he could barely speak. He was so emotional, not just because he'd won the Challenge Cup, but he wanted that group of players to be remembered for the best of reasons, and they now will be. So yes, I think that was a defining game for St Helens and that group, and there will be a different St Helens next year. And legacy comes from, can you do it with 2 or 3 different teams? So you talk about Leeds, the team that won the grand final in 2004 was probably 2 or 3 teams down from the one that in 2017. So, Saints do that, then they're absolutely deserve to be accorded the same kind of accolades. Not sure where Cass go from here.
Well, and that is the question, is it? Obviously, they're changing coach. Ollie Holmes, a mainstay, going. You'd think some of their older players would retire at the end of this season, which will...
Or go to Bradford, which in some respects is the same thing.
Well, they might like it there because it's a shorter part anyway. We're used to that playing at Castleford. So there is going to be major change at Jungle. And bar the League Leaders Shield, which we should not decry, because when Saints pretended to be excited when they lifted it a couple of years ago, we rightly rounded on them. I made a gif of myself holding up a plate because that's how they dealt with it. But that's all Castleford have got to show for this era. And I'm not having a go at Castleford, by the way, when I say this. Teams who aren't Wigan, Saints, Leeds, whatever, and maybe they're the only 3 actually to put in this argument, you only get a finite time in eras to win things. Hence why I'm still annoyed that Scott Griggs didn't kick the ball out, because not that Wakefield would have gone on and won Super League that year, but we'd have got to the playoffs, possibly. And we ain't going to do that again for a while. And, Wakefield had their great era in the 60s and nothing since. So, a bit bitter about that. My nephew, 7 years old, gets to see the Cass play at Wembley, let alone all the rest of the family who saw Fev play there. And I'm still waiting to see Wakefield. But you get a finite time if you're not a club with money and resource and everything behind you. And Castleford's time, perhaps, has been and gone. Well, I said it after the grand final in 2017 to Mark, and he's mentioned it on the programme. That was their chance. And we all know the reasons why they blew it. But
to be at 3 finals and not win any of them, it is a shame, because I think that era, which is coming to an end, deserves something on the honours board other than the League Leaders Shield. Something that is clearly presentable in a trophy cabinet. Doesn't look like something you might serve the chairman's afternoon tea on. Is a measure of a team. You look in the honours of most clubs, and it starts with Championship / Grand Final, then it goes Challenge Cup, and League Leaders barely gets the mention that it actually deserves, because it isn't really a thing. It should be, but it isn't. It's not how we measure things. I think the interesting thing for Castleford now is Darryl can't do any more. He has revived them. He's taken them from almost being in danger of relegation when he took over to being respected and admired and playing a brand of rugby that is associated with a team that means absolutely everything to him. And if they hadn't yet decided who his replacement was going to be, I would say the very, very least that should happen is he stays on till the end of the season. The likelihood is, when you look at the league table and you look at the fact that as we speak now, their game in Catalan is probably going to be off this weekend, that they will not make the playoffs. They've got a huge slew of matches, like everybody has, to fit in, and we're going to have more and more games called off. It's going to be harder to move from where you are in the table, which is going to be nothing to do with form. It's going to be more to do with player availability, and it would be a shame if things tailed off and Darryl got in his car at the end of the last game of the season and that was it. There is a case for saying, and it would be really interesting to get the thoughts of the die-hard Castleford fans. Would it be in everybody's interest if Darryl left with honour now, and Lee Radford could come in and effectively have a longer pre-season for next year? He can evaluate the players that he's got at his disposal. He can start playing maybe the way he wants to play. He can pick some players in positions that he sees for the future. He can maybe give the younger talent that he rates a bit more of a run. He'll already know clearly who's staying and who isn't, and it won't take long before we all know what's happening on that front, because most of these deals have already been done anyway. Is there a case for saying that Cass now say that we look to next season and we bring in the man who we've chosen to be at the helm, and that was our 80 minutes for this season, and we gave it our all. We couldn't really do a lot more. We came up against a team that on the day had a better bench than we did, that made more of an impact. My only thought about Castleford's team selection was probably brave to go with 4 forwards on the bench in that heat. I think that if you need to change a game late on, and you say it wasn't in doubt to the last minute, I mean, it was only more than one score between the teams 9 minutes from time. So they were still in it. But, let's pick a name totally at random. Now, if a Danny Richardson type figure was on the bench, and clearly you've got to be in form, and you go on for that last 10 minutes when the game is still in the balance, and you come up with something that perhaps other players don't have in their repertoire, just so you're offering a difference. Wellesby was that for St Helens. I don't know. The hindsight on that is a wonderful thing, but I don't think Darryl could have done any more. I don't think he could have got any more about the team out of the team that he selected. I think they were all primed. They were all ready to go. But is it now with, maybe 10 games of the season left, if they get that many, to give Lee Radford the reins?
Yeah, interesting times at Castleford. As we were trying to work out on the way there and the way back, Mr. Kellner, all 4020 magazine fame, loves that aping the Norwegian commentator thing, meme, whatever it's called, trope. And the only famous people we could think of from Castleford were Henry Moore and Viv Nicholson, which, as Mr. Kellner would say, one's for the teenagers there. So if anyone's got any famous people from Castleford, because there's lots from St Helens.
Oh, he came up with another one. I'm trying to remember who it was.
Was this at 4 in the morning? See, I missed it. You said.
I mentioned that to him, and he said, yes, but there's... who was it?
I have to go back now and listen.
I can't remember.
Some messages on my screen, which I will read. From Kev, who says, or Kevin, don't know, shorten your name when you don't like it. Castleford were unlucky, Saints had the ball into the ball second half. Plenty of trophies for Powell to be won with the wire. Maybe it will be there next year, 2022. It'll be their year.
Well, that's what they want. That's why they're signing him. So, again, there will be no leeway. He will get in there in the knowledge that has to deliver.
As long as he's got no virologists in the halfbacks, he should be all right. Mark Winstanley, I find it disingenuous. That's a big word for a Tuesday night. To give it to a player on the side that lost quite convincingly. This is the Lance Todd Trophy, of course. His team didn't score in the second half, so despite his efforts, it produced nothing. Coop, Wellesby, Roby all have an argument. And
they did, but the votes were collected at 70 minutes, and at 70 minutes it was 18-12, so it wasn't that convincing at the time. So I'm not making a case for those of us that voted for Nye Levels. I'm saying that the system of voting is wrong, but actually I probably still would have voted for him on the basis of the fact that I think he had a massive influence on that game, got Castleford to win in it, and then probably kept them in it but they couldn't ultimately do it. So no, the history of the Lance Todd Trophy is littered with people who have a better claim in the last 10 minutes of the game than those who actually got it. And I would cite 1978 as the classic example.
Maybe they should just rename it the Man of the Last 10 Minutes Award. And Danny Houghton would have won it that year when Mark Sneed won it.
It's not disingenuous. It's just the nature of said.
It is
beast.
what it is. But I did enjoy afterwards Tom Maguire's interview with Niall Evans, which we've nicked part of the audio and stick it online. Very much in the style of David Coleman, but he won't have known that. Because I very much doubt Tom's watched that clip of David Coleman and Don Fox from 1960. So your team's lost me.
A bit of sweet moment, yeah.
Oh, thanks, Dave. No. But it was what it was. It was, overall, Wembley 2021. I wasn't there last year. And it's an interesting thing. A couple of years ago, they did release the names of who voted for who for the Lance Todd Trophy, and then they haven't done it since. So I don't know why they did it that one year and not since. Maybe they couldn't read my writing.
Then we would have found out who voted for Jesse Sene Lafayette.
Was there Sene Lafayette in the press box and we didn't know?
I can only assume that's somebody that had a bet on Jesse Sene Lafayette.
There's some worrying scenes in the Wembley press box. Not people trying to invade it as they did at the Euro 2020 final, but a lot of shorts worn. And it has to be. I mean, I'm wearing shorts now, but you can't see it, and I'm at home, so it doesn't matter. But it's not the. I'm trying to say this without making it sound. Oh, sorry, I'll just say it anyway. When the Leeds Rhinos women were on telly, look tanned. Nothing like that. No, very, very, very white pasty legs. The kind of ones that if the sun was shining on them, Dickie Bird would be pointing at you to cover them up because they'd be putting the players off. Not
motley crew we are, aren't we? Some of us wore a suit because it was an occasion that demanded it.
I wore a shirt. I didn't wear my Ralph Rimmer tribute jacket as some people wanted me to wear, but that only comes out when they let me on the BBC, which they never will again. So that's in the way.
What I would say is we get overly fixated with how many people were there. I don't care how many people were there. It was a fantastic occasion for every single person that was there, and every single person that was there deserves enormous credit for making it sound like the stadium was full. The atmosphere could not have been any better. We beat ourselves up. Oh, did they get 45,000? Did they sell every ticket? I'm not bothered. Everybody who turned up made that a fantastic occasion, and for that day alone, we presented ourselves magnificently. We were so good that even Keir Starmer liked it.
Sir Keir Starmer.
Well, there you go. How many sirs were tweeting how much they'd enjoyed the Challenge Cup final?
No. Marcus Rashford's not a sir yet, so I don't think he was watching, because he's the real leader of the opposition. We know that. Tyrone Mings, Shadow Home Secretary. Shall I come to Graham's point? I will do, because Graham, you frequently get in touch with this programme about this point, and I'll explain it for you now, because I've explained it before. He says, how can you say if people wanted to watch Championship rugby, matches would be on TV? How does that square with media-driven Women's Super League? Fans aren't interested, but it gets on TV. Well, here's the point, Graham. When we threw our hat in to the Women's Rugby League boat just after Super League launched, Women's Super League launch, that is, and we tried to get the rights, and we had them for a brief period, and got the Challenge Cup final on the BBC website and such. We did that because we saw how the world of sport was turning. And there was a much more coverage of women's sport than there'd ever been before, outside of things like tennis or athletics or whatever. Women's football, women's rugby union, women's cricket, all on TV, netball. And our theory was, why shouldn't Rugby League have part of that pie? Because there's obviously a interest in covering women's sport for whatever reason, and it might not be because of the level of interest, but it has been decided that we're going to cover things, and we thought we should be part of this bandwagon. I think that's fair to say. I said it when Danica was in the other week. Is our coverage on this channel on YouTube above the interest perhaps in the public at the moment? Yes, I said it was. The reason for that is we get the access. And it's easy for me to go down to Bellevue and sit there for a couple of games if the doctors turn up and get post-match reaction, which if I had to do it for the championship game or whatever, I'd have to go further afield. And there's enough people already doing that. It's on TV because Sky want to show women's sport. So why wouldn't we capitalise on that and do that? It would be foolish to say, oh, no, we don't want to do that because we want you to show Swinton versus Batley instead. It's not a knock on the Championship. It's not a knock on League One. But the interest in the mainstream media, to use that awful phrase people use, isn't there. Whereas it is for women's sport. It's all rugby league. We've seen with the wheelchair international the other week. There's a bigger interest since the Paralympics in 2012 in this country in sports, parasport, whatever you want to call it. So why wouldn't we get involved and take advantage of that as rugby league? It's still rugby league. Now, ask why the Championship isn't on, and the problem is the answers aren't ones people want to hear because we say them and people don't like them. That's just how it is. If there was the interest,
I think as well to back up your point, I would be very, very surprised if the RFL haven't offered to the likes of Twitch, which we've seen then transferred onto Sky Sports as a highlights package, the opportunity to pick any of their product. You know, the RFL need to sell the Championship and League One and make as much money as they can at the moment because of the parlous state of the finances in the game that basically mean that even they're holding their hand and cap out to Super League to try and get some money. What was picked up by the broadcasters was the women's element. And the only reason they picked that up is partly because it's a developing market and a different market and in tune with their market, but also because it's a developable product as well. That if the standard wasn't high enough, and we're not talking about any given game on any given week, but if there wasn't credibility behind what they're putting out in the women's sphere, Twitch wouldn't take it. There's a million other sports out there that they have heard of. There's a million other variants of the sport. You know, they do an eating contest if they thought that was going to bring them viewers. But what they looked at was actually there's something in this women's sport because A, it's good, and B, it's developable. And you can make very quickly, you can get personalities out of that sport. You can start to get a feel for it. It leads into a World Cup. Virtually all of the women that we're seeing on television at the moment we'll have a chance. We'll be seeing them again in the World Cup. You know, it might even be that some of them are playing for PNG or Ireland or whoever it might be. But the women will become more and more recognisable. The product already has a status. Are you clearing out the bin?
I've just remembered I've got to plug in my laptop.
And I think, you know, with the greatest will in the world, the Championship to broadcasters doesn't offer that. And whatever we think about the resonance beyond rugby league of names like Featherstone or Halifax or Batley or Dewsbury, then as a Super League, Leeds versus St Helens women's clash. And that, again, is that, you know, why are people looking at Toulouse as being marketable in the Super League? Because actually that's the whole essence of what Super League is about, or it was when it was set up. And the issue of what's happened to Lee this year tells you again why there is scepticism about teams that are playing at part-time level in the competition below being able to be credible when they get promoted. The women's game could be ended. We've said we thought they might have even made a mistake going to. We could see why they wanted to, but there was going to be a slight distillation in quality if they did, and that's proved to be the case. But I think what we did see is that certainly in the Challenge Cup semi-finals, in the final, there's a game, I believe, is it next Monday at Leeds and Saints?
Yeah.
You know, that'll be big. You know, it might not seem big comparable to people that watch Championship teams, but as far as Twitch and Sky are concerned, they're already building this game up. It will be a precursor possibly to what the grand final might look like. And you know, York beating Wigan is a bigger result in terms of those looking from the outside, because Wigan is such a name, than Dewsbury playing Batley for the fourth time this season.
The smartest thing they did was clubs taking on existing amateur setups. So, I mean, again, I'm not speaking from a position of knowing everything, but it's obvious that St Helens took Thatto Heath and turned them into St Helens women. because they'd won the Challenge Cup a load of times before. And I can't remember who I interviewed at the launch of the Women's Super League when it was first changed over, and we were at Huddersfield, and Lois did a speech because she was the poster woman of Women's Rugby League, and there was a Saints player there and asked her about wearing the shirt, because that was the key thing, isn't it? It's all right playing for Thaddeus Heath or Stanley Rangers or whatever, but the red V, St Helens, everyone knows it. There's a cachet with it. To go back to Graham's point, in an ideal world, in Rugby League Utopia that I've just set up, of course, you would play the Women's Challenge Cup final before the men's at Wembley. Would I do that in reality? No. And the only reason is because the 1895 Cup final will bring in more money. And that's reality. Now, one day, hopefully down the line, that's not the case. And the Women's Challenge Cup final would bring in thousands and thousands of people to Wembley. That's not the case at the moment. But there is something there in a product that we can build without having too much of an outlay at the moment, which is a shame because the women deserve money or whatever. But it's not there at the minute, so we're all aware of it.
I also think that the way ahead for the championship is a highlights package, but the way that sport works at the moment in terms of television is you have to pay for that. So you would have to go to Channel 4 or Channel 5 in much the same way that Rugby Union have done with their products, and that includes their championship. You have to film it. You have to pay for the cost of putting that together. And then you hope that by putting it on a television station, they'll either see the value of it and at some point in the renegotiation they'll pay for that, or your sponsors will say, well, if we're going to be on terrestrial television for an hour once a week, we'll stick some money in. We want to see our name on the shirts or our name plastered on the billboards. But you have to outlay. And you look at women's soccer, which is a perfectly reasonable comparison. And they paid to have their initial coverage on Sky. But what they've now got is a deal in the millions that is partly on the BBC. If you invest in something like that, there is a return. So you're going to have to invest in the championship. Now, who's got the money to do that? The RFL certainly don't. The championship clubs don't. I'm not 100% sure that whilst our league has been a great boon, particularly over a pandemic period, that we now have a product that, it isn't in some way perhaps stopping people going to games, because it's actually better value than going to a match, or it has been for certainly Championship and League One clubs. I don't know where you go with that at the moment, what the end game of that is. But I think it's all very well saying the Championship is more established, the standards higher. What do television want? If you're going to sell it to them, you've got to produce it, and we can't.
And as I said, with football, standards irrelevant. Women's Super League football is over promoted. Everyone knows that, but there's reasons for that, and you just have to accept it's going to happen. It's the same as going to happen. Well, it's just how it is.
The women's Euros will be here next year. That'll be massive. The Women's World Cup, I think, is in Australia and New Zealand. 23. The viewing figures for that will be absolutely enormous on the back of. Some of those players will have been recognised by playing in the English Premiership. We have to acknowledge that the world is changing, and whilst the point is valid, what does the Championship need to do? You're not comparing apples with the same kind of fruit if you're comparing it to women's rugby league.
15 minutes on Sky tonight, which minus the ads is about 11 minutes, isn't it? Right. That would just be grand final gold. It wouldn't be highlights of Widnes versus London. It's as simple as that. That's it. That's it. We offered to make a Championship highlights package back in the days at Radio Yorkshire Stroke Proper Sport, and there were a million obstacles in front of us. Now, the RFL, our league, don't have those obstacles. They could do that if they had the resource and wanted to. Here's some numbers from the weekend. I didn't put these out on Twitter, the links to the press conferences post-match, because I kind of feel a bit dicey about doing it, because I'm taking other people's work for our advantage. But you can go on YouTube and see what numbers our videos get. It's not as if they're hidden. The post-1895 Cup final, so that's James Ford and Paul March on Zoom after the match, currently 859 views. Post-Challenge Cup final, so again, it's Dowell Powell and Christian Wolf and a bit of Niall Evalds audio, 722 views. Now, if we were, and we've got 1,500 subscribers on YouTube, if we were the RFL, if we were Super League and put those videos out, they'd get a lot more views. And I don't know why they don't do it themselves. Because if I can edit them, as a one-man band here, I'm sure there are people
in the car.
I'm sure they could do it. Well, the first half of the Challenge Cup finals are going on. I'm sure someone could do it at the RFL at Super League. Post every match. The NRL put their presses up, don't they? Post match. I don't know why. I know clubs like to sell content and whatever, but Super League can do it. It's their competition. Here's an interesting thing, and this is a tricky question. Obviously, Sky have the rights to the full matches and everything. They pay money for that. Anyone who is on YouTube and follows rugby league knows there is a channel that takes the footage from Fox in Australia and puts full games up on YouTube. Now, they're not supposed to be doing that, but thousands of people are watching those videos, and none of the money from advertising on those videos is going back to the RFL, Super League, Sky, whoever. Now, I don't know if Sky would want to put full games up on YouTube after the event, but someone's already doing it for them. I don't know in the deals if Super League can or the RFL can, but as I say, somebody's already ripping them off and putting them on and getting the fruits of somebody else's labour. So why don't they do that as well? If there's a reason why they can't for rights reasons, that's fine. That's not an issue. But if they can do it, you may as well, because 7,000 people had already watched the Challenge Cup final again. Well, that might be more if it's on the official rugby league channel or whatever. Again, it's more complicated because there are rights issues in play. But someone's already ripping them off. We can tell them to stop if we want. It's easy enough done.
I think the other thing is one of the things we watch on a weekly basis is NRL Try Time. That is a blatant advert paid for by Fox Sports / the NRL to get people interested in watching the full games that are coming up later in the week. But you have to pay for that. Sky are not commissioning that. They are putting on an hour's fantastic program that is produced over in Australia. That admittedly helps them when they say, our game on Thursday is North Queensland against Newcastle, and you've just, you've sat there and watched the tries of those two teams this week. But it's not as simple anymore as just saying how good is your product and it deserves a place. You've got to find a place. You've got to pay for a place. And, the point made is a valid one by our correspondent, but sadly, that isn't the world we now live in.
Go look at the Sky Sports schedules, BT, Free Sport, Premier, sportystuff.tv or whatever it's called, and have a look at their schedules. And outside of live sport and repeats of live sport, it is all filler material, much of which has probably been produced by Matchroom, but if not, it is filler material that is made by people to fill time and given away. And
given away because they've got the live stuff that they're going to put later down the line is where they'll make their money.
And someone might be flicking through and see that and stay watching it like I did with Probably Come on Sunday because they're too lazy to turn the TV over. But we have to do that ourselves. I don't want to criticise whatever our league is doing or whatever, but, these are the things that will get people interested. As I say, going back to making stars out of people for their abilities, not because what they have and haven't done off the pitch in the past and come back from. But that's going back over old ground again. 22's just sent us a message. It's got 9.1 thousand views now, the Challenge Cup final, the full coverage on YouTube. So again, that whether those numbers are good or bad, I don't know, but it's still 9,000 people which are watching something. They obviously want to watch it, and it's been put on there not through legal means. And you can make two arguments. You either say, well, we stop it, and, well, we're stopping people from watching something, and they might become paying customers in the future. Or we do it ourselves, and we cut out the middleman. And that's the... And again, we might not be able to do one, so is it beneficial to do the other? We may see it as free advertising for the sport. I don't know. It's you can look at it and say, we'll turn a blind eye because actually it's a good thing because we can't. It's a tricky one. It's a tricky one. Load of questions from Robbie Rhino. Robbie, hello, welcome. What do you think Super League can do to get more games on every week? Bloody COVID. Get rid of COVID. Get rid of COVID. How do we do that? Well, it's finished now, apparently. Freedom Day.
Yeah, it emigrated on Sunday night at midnight, apparently.
So that's good.
Apart from all the teams that can't play this weekend because they've got it.
I don't think we can do anything, can we? I mean, the women.
No, we're just going to have to limp to the end of this season, I'm afraid. I thought getting through last season was a terrific effort, particularly as it was all behind closed doors. I think this has been a harder season, and I think that there's a really interesting point coming up that these will be the first games where there is no restriction on crowd. I suspect not only will a lot of people not be there because they still don't feel comfortable going into a large crowd, but there's a lot of people who are still isolated, who are suffering from the effects of having COVID. I don't think we're going to get thousands of people turning back up at Rugby League. The hope was that, when the restrictions are lifted, which originally was going to be a month ago, the virus would be under control and it would be like the end of World War II, and everybody would want to be at a sporting occasion, and we'd go from 4,000 and everybody distanced to 18,000, everybody hugging each other. It's not going to be like that. It really is not going to be like that. And I think that paves the way to more economic pain for every single Super League club. I think the budgets that they've done this year included having a lot more fans than they're actually going to get. There's also the rollovers of people who are still owed all their matches this year and possibly even some into next year. And that will roll into, I probably won't renew my season ticket. I might go and pick and choose some of the games that I want to go to. But I've virtually had 2 years without value for money through nobody's fault. But it's a hell of a thing to then ask them to pay for a third year. So I suspect there are even more difficult economic times around the corner, and the answer to the question is the one that everybody wants. We have no idea. I think we just need to get as close as we can to a grand final that will be having an ending as good as the one last year, but it'd be sod's law in rugby league terms that we'll probably get to October and things may not be as dire in terms of the infection rates as they are at the moment. And Castleford will get there because they deserve to, because they're the best team, and then only 20,000 people will turn up anyway.
You can't help but feel on Saturday, after the 1895 Cup final, we got away with it. And that's for no fault of anyone. We just somehow managed to get through.
Although we do think, as we sit here, and again, unless something's happened in the last hour, that both Saints and Cass won't be playing this week because of outbreaks of COVID in the camp.
And go back to the Women's Super League for a second, and we talk about integrity of competitions. And we spoke last week about the number of games that had been postponed, and more were last week and awarded as 24-0 results. I would actually now. I don't think you can do this because we're halfway through the season. But it's Rugby League, we can do whatever we want on this programme. I'd remove those 24-0s now from the table because there's obviously going to be more of them, and work on another solution to end the season, because I don't think all the games are going to be played. You can't rearrange all the games. It can't happen. But as well, talking about integrity, with the best way in the world, because Wakefield are obviously my club, they weren't going to lose 24-0 to St Helens women on Sunday, although they may have been on the pop at Wembley, so it might have been all right. I'm sure if they were playing on the Sunday, they wouldn't have been on the pop at Wembley. Leeds Rhinos women would have beaten Huddersfield by more than 24 points on Sunday, but didn't play. And those results, and York being awarded a couple of games, again, not through any fault of their own. The integrity of the league table is massively compromised, and I think they probably do need to work out another way of finishing this season.
Do you know what I do now? And I've been thinking about this because there's no point us even trying to preview the games this weekend, because as we sit here, we don't even know if they're going ahead.
The players.
I would now look and say the maximum number of weeks we can possibly have is, let's say, 10 between now and the end of the season. Let's redraw the competition. Where you've got to is where you've got to. But we need to have Wigan playing Saints. We need to have Hull. The latest thing is we don't think we're going to be able to fit in Hull and Hull KR. We have to. Those two clubs desperately need that, because if there's one game that, under unrestricted crowds is going to have the near to capacity attendance that every club needs at the moment, it's those games. And because we don't play teams an equitable number of times in the year anyway, change everything. As of this weekend, stop trying to play games on a Monday night when teams have played on a Thursday, and just look at the fixtures and say, Wakefield need to play Cass. So that game has to be scheduled, and we have to have a week between games, because if there is going to be a COVID issue, then if we've got matches so close together, we are going to lose them. We do need to say what works for every single team that's left economically. And even if we do get to the point of having magic weekend, forget the fixtures that have been drawn already. Let's have some fixtures there that can make lots of money for all the clubs and get more people there. And at the moment, I just feel that we're just trying to avoid the mines in the minefield. We know they're there, and every so often they're going off, and there's nothing we can do about it. I just think we need the kind of leadership that the World Cup has shown, where they basically said, we know there are some issues, we know it's not cut and dried that everybody's coming, but we're telling you now it's going ahead. And that's leadership. And I just think somebody in Super League needs to say, as of the 1st of August, everything's rescheduled. This is who's playing. This is when they're playing. We've spoken to Sky. We can guarantee them that games will be on if we only have them every week rather than if we try and have 2 or 3 in a week. And we want to give them the biggest and best games possible. So they are going to get a whole derby. We are going to get Wigan playing St Helens again with an unrestricted crowd. And it might even be that some clubs need to pull resort. They might need to say, well, all the money that comes in over those 10 games that are left goes into a central pot and gets divided equally by the 12 teams, because perhaps some clubs won't get the lucrative home. If Leeds are to play Wakefield again, and you get more money out of playing that at Headingley because more people can get in there, but Wakefield get a bigger share of the gate, then whatever we need to do, let's do it.
Before I forget, fully in favour of nicking things from other sports. So from football, I should certainly nick the Champions of England. You'll never sing that if you're a Wakefield fan next time we play Castleford. Especially that game when we played a couple of weeks ago was terrible. We want to play that again on the telly. I don't know.
You see that, but that's the other thing. The standard is
that game was terrible because it was Wednesday night. Yes.
Nobody's. I mean, again, how many clubs this week already have not named a 21? Now they may well be waiting for people to come through protocols, and we'll end up with a squad of 21. But how does it keep looking when Hull have named 19 this week so far?
We've not got any more sons of former players to fit in. We need some more. Wait, Jason Robinson's grandson, is he? Oh, it might be a daughter actually. I messed that up. Anyway, back to.
But that's the other thing. We're asking people to pay 20 quid, 25 quid a shot for some clubs that, through no fault of their own, are turning out half an academy team, or borrowing, loaning players at the last minute who won't be with them the following week because they'll be loaned somewhere else where they're needed. So, if the word integrity means having a competition that is worth people spending their money to go and watch, let's do something really, really radical, like redrawing it for the last 10 rounds.
Which player's going to have the most heritage numbers picked up this season? That's going to be a question in the future. Robbie Rhino, he's back, because I'm doing these in order. Do you think Callum McClellan would be a good signing for Castleford? Because obviously that's been reported today by John Davidson. And also, do you think Aidan Caesar would be a good halfback partner to Luke Gale next year? Because Aidan Caesar has definitely signed up at the Rhinos. He's done a video and everything. Did he say, I want to play for a big club or something, which is always funny? I may have taken that out of context. But Callum McClellan, who was at Cass, went to Reunion, went to Leeds, and now seems to be heading back to Castleford. It's not just not being able to break into the Leeds team for whatever reason. Obviously, you'll have seen him closer than I have, Phil. But he's a player who has certainly been talked to for a long time. He wouldn't have had that move to Scotland and back if not.
He's had a lot of injuries. He played really well when he went out on dual reg at Featherstone. He just needs a chance. He's not going to get a chance if it's Gale and Caesar at Leeds. I suspect that one of the reasons Cass want to sign him, they may be looking at the resources that they've got available next year. Clearly, Gareth O'Brien, I think, is going to be in the halves, but there is some doubts over Danny Richardson's long-term future. The thing about McClelland is clubs are needing to sign people who have come through their system because they get dispensation on the salary cap. And that helps in any number of ways. So the fact that he's come through the Tigers system means that in terms of his value on the cap, it'll be relatively little, which gives them space to go and sign other players as well. So it's a great fit for Cass. He deserves the chance to try and fulfil his potential that he showed there as an academy player. I think, again, that is a move like Lachlan Coote going to Hull KR that works for all the parties involved in it. As for Caesar and Gale, that'll be interesting because there is more similarity about the way they play than there is difference. So it'd be really interesting to see how they integrate. But clearly Robert Louis was departing. There aren't too many halfbacks who are available of that kind of quality, and Leeds have stepped in and signed him. So. Interesting. I think Leeds have got a great back division that needs unlocking, and if that partnership can do it, don't want to talk too much about Leeds, but when Rob Louis came back the other week, they looked different because they had a bespoke standoff playing. The more halfbacks you can have in your team that are actual halfbacks, the better your three-quarters and fullback are going to play. So I think that's a great signing for Leeds and a really good signing for Callum McClelland if he goes back to Cass.
Can Aidan Caesar play for the second 40 minutes of a match as well?
I think that again is a bit of a misnomer because that second 40 minutes have both been against the same team. And I think what it says is we're not giving enough credit to the team that played so well in the second half against them. So, yeah, there are clearly some issues about you falling away in the second half, but maybe part of that is to do with the opposition played so damn well in the second half, a little bit like St Helens did at Wembley.
No, because it's about slagging off Leeds, and you get more clicks for slagging off Leeds and praising Catalans because they're foreign. Stuart has already watched the final again. He was at Wembley on Saturday. He wanted to watch it from a different perspective. It is different when you watch it on TV. It is different. Wembley's huge. I don't think you can understand how big it is without being in there. Certainly pitch side, it is just ridiculously big. 22 says 9.1 thousand people have watched that video now. So again, that's money we're not getting. JWoww TV, I think. Why is the RFL so bad at promoting the Challenge Cup and X Factor players? And what did you think of the ticketing prices for the cup final? Remember when did they give those extra thousands of pounds to the likes of Johnny Lomax and then never seem to do anything with them? And again, that's not a criticism of Johnny Lomax or any of the other players, but they never did anything. They weren't in the Mail on Sunday or anything, were they?
The ambassadors.
Was that what they were called? They could play the combined nations also. Maybe the ambassadors could be a team at the World Cup to replace the Australians. We'll talk about that in a minute. I'm going to defend the RFL in terms of promoting the Challenge Cup this year, in terms of no one knew, and point proven by the 1895 Cup final being on 3 hours before it kicked off. No one knew exactly what was going to happen this year. Now, going forward, and in the past, you can have your criticisms and they would be fair. I think this year, they'd be damned if they do and damned if they don't. Because if they spent a load of money on marketing and then no one was allowed in, it's money thrown down the toilet. And I think, again, people will criticise the BBC's promotion of it. I saw an advert before Newsnight. That's our target audience, people tuning in to see Emily Maitlis have a go at politicians.
Well, Shakir probably picked up that it was on from that very advert.
So, with the cartoon people. I mean, should get rid of those cartoon people.
What I would say is that it was the lead sports item on the ITV News at 10, which is not exactly a hotbed for rugby league. It was the lead sports, I think it was a headline item in the BBC evening news. It was on national radio in terms of its headline value. As you say, I'm not sure they could have done a lot more this year. I can't honestly say about ticket price. I could tell you how much it costs to park your car at Wembley.
Yeah, I don't know how much it cost because obviously I didn't pay for a ticket. But I did look a couple of days beforehand because I won a pair of tickets. So I wanted to see how much they were worth. We're between a rock and a hard place on this one because the argument is if you undersell it, people will never want to pay the true value. And this goes back to, Huddersfield's season tickets for one example. It's all right giving away for £1 1 year, but if you're asking people to pay 300 quid the next year, whatever, They ain't going to do it. So you want to make them affordable to everyone, but you also don't want to make them too cheap where people think, well, you know, I'll just wait till the week before and get them on Groupon, as has happened in the past, of course. But you also don't want to make it too cheap that people don't see it as a premium event who are not in our bubble. So it's like going back to the World Cup. You can get cheap tickets for games, but you can also get premium tickets for games. It's always difficult, and I know we've come off a year where a lot of people won't have worked as much and won't have as much income. And you are asking a lot, as you say, you know, to park at Wembley's expensive, to go down to Wembley's expensive, everything about Wembley's expensive.
Yeah, but it's relative, isn't it? Because if you make it an event, nobody says, oh, the tickets for American football when it comes to Wembley or Spurs is expensive, because you made it such a desirable event. You know, 140,000 people went to the British Grand Prix. I didn't hear any one of them say, nah, yeah, but the tickets were expensive. They just went, where can I get a ticket? I need to be there. So I think what we need to do is, I think that the Challenge Cup final will move to its May slot that was earmarked for it. It'll be easier to get school parties down there. Once you get, again, that feel of the 1895 Cup lends a different angle to it. More people will want to be there. The price of the individual ticket becomes less of an issue. I don't hear people who I know have bought tickets for the Arsenal semi-final for the World Cup saying, yeah, but it's a bit expensive for it. They're saying, I want to be at Arsenal. That I may only ever go to that stadium once. It may be England in the semi-final. That'll be a fantastic day out. I want to be there. The Copper Box with the wheelchair guys as well. There are people already saying, not how much is a ticket, but how do I get a ticket? And that's why we need events, and promote the event. The ticket price becomes less relevant.
We discussed this a couple of years ago on the programme, because I remember bringing it up as a point, and we mentioned it on Saturday on our journey. The one thing missing this year from Wembley was the schools final, and I'm not sure people missed it, because as great as it is for the kids playing and, you know, the experience of playing out on the field, Featherstone versus York may have been more important to the future of rugby league.
I think the kids need something. I mean, clearly, obviously, one of the reasons it didn't happen this year was we haven't had a champion schools. So, you know, very difficult to get to a final if schools haven't really been playing any competitive sport for close on 18 months. But champion schools will be back. And I think what we used to find was that the day before in London, there used to be loads of schools finals, and the kids paraded around the pitch after the schools game had been on. I think, you know, even that tradition went, and it moved up to Warrington on a midweek. So we need to find a slot for the kids, and the kids need to play at a venue where it inspires them to stick with the sport. So again, to use the Kevin Sinfield analogy, it was playing at Wembley at the Evan for Oldham schools that made him sit down afterwards and go, wow, yeah, if I could make a career out of this, that would be something. He did all right, I think, as well, when he decided that's what he wanted to do. So I think you can't play it before the grand final at Old Trafford, because I think the plan will be to have the women's grand final before the men's grand final. I think that is a desire that will maybe happen, although there's still a case for saying if you keep the women separate, it gives you an extra event. But I do think we do have a ground now in Headingley whereby if you had any school kids playing at that before a match that had 10, 15, 20,000 people there, it would be the kind of unforgettable life experience that would keep them in the sport. So I know we've said it before, I still think it's a marketable aim. We have to have a championship grand final at Headingley. And you could imagine, can't you, if it was Featherstone against, I don't know, let's say Bradford, that there might be 10, 12,000 people there. And if you put a kids' game on before that, you're in the right arena. You're in the right facilities. It means something. There's a history about that venue that I defy anybody to stand on the pitch and look round those new facilities at the moment and not feel inspired when nothing's happening. But to do it, you know, when there's a big crowd in and be the undercard to that, sell the idea of of filming it to Sky if they've got the Championship final or whatever, however you do it. We have to find a place for it. But I think you're right. We're not going to get 3 games at Wembley now. On the 1895, for the future of the sport, is more important than the kids' game.
I hate being right on things. CG says, speaking of COVID issues, players spouting rubbish on social media is becoming extremely tiring. Freedom of speech is an important thing, CG, unless it's freedom of something you don't agree with, and then it's not good. You think the players will have learned, wouldn't you, from what happened last week? But obviously some of them haven't, and not to the extent of that person. And I understand he's had his right of reply, which he's entitled to do. I've not listened to it because I've got no interest in listening to what he says, because I think, it's patently obvious. For other players, obviously Jake Truman sent out a tweet last night, which may have been foolish because, people have replied to him saying it's not just the flu, because everyone in some way has been affected by this. Jake Truman doesn't tweet that often, so it was bizarre that and I'm using him as an example because I'm assuming CG, that's what you're referring to. And if you're not, I apologise. He doesn't tweet that often, so why would you decide to tweet about something like that? I don't know. Other players tweeting about, not being tested anymore, so, games don't get called off. The problem is, yes, it's annoying for the players to miss games and the clubs. The testing isn't to see if someone is going to be in hospital with COVID. It's to see if they have the virus within them to pass on to others. But clubs tell them, the sport tells them, their agents should be telling them because they're quick to make a buck off them. And if they don't listen to those people who guide their careers, there's nothing more you can do, and they have to face the consequences. Because I use myself as an example, because I am myself, I have tweeted things in the past which I've been told to remove from other jobs, and I've been happy to do so because I don't want to lose work because of a silly tweet. And it's nothing. I've never posted anything I would say was offensive or wrong necessarily, but it was not prejudicial to my work, but it wasn't seen as favourable to my work. So I was happy to remove it. Now, would I say to people in private, I wasn't happy with that because, I thought I was making a fair point? Yeah, but that doesn't matter. What we say in public and what we say in private are completely different things. And if people don't realise that, having seen someone in their sport get a £2,000 fine for going to the very extreme of, posting stuff on social media, not, being a Burke, then I don't think they'll ever learn. You have freedom of expression, but you also have the consequences of that, as we keep saying. But
absolutely.
But we can keep saying it till we're blue in the face. If they don't listen, it's not our fault.
Well, again, I do think you're right that agents and clubs have a role to play here.
Just don't be on social media. If you keep it on WhatsApp with your mates, and if they leak it, well, more for them. As Kevin says, you've got to be careful what you tweet now, even if it was years ago. Yeah. Look back through your tweets. You can do it. I haven't been too unkind about Gavin Henson, so I'm all right. Chris says, any thoughts on Salford potentially leaving the AJ Bell Stadium to Salford City FC's ground Moor Lane in 2022? They're in a pickle here, aren't they? And again, it's not necessarily of their own making, but as I said before, it does show you the value of having your own ground in terms of destiny. But Salford do seem to appear to be a club at the moment who they had all that great goodwill going forward on the pitch for getting to the grand final, getting to Wembley. But off the pitch, they've still got a lot of big questions to answer now.
I think their executive chairman, Paul King, said Moor Lane may be their option if the AJ Bell decides not to be, and they might have to take a step backwards to build the foundation to move forward. I don't know what other choice they've got, to be honest. I mean, we've got this ridiculous situation at the moment where there's a team in Super League that can't get a ground and doesn't know where their home will be in the near future. We've got another team in the Championship that just signed a brilliant deal with Wimbledon for their future and are getting on average 250 people at the moment. So I don't know. There is no easy answer. I suspect that Moor Lane is an option, but to leave the AJ Bell, They would need some kind of financial compensation, I think, if they could, to just set them up and make sure that there was a legacy from having been there. It would be such a terrible shame.
It's been a while since.
But then there's issues about the money in Salford at the moment, anyway, and moving to fan ownership, because since the days of a benefactor who some lauded, they may have been left debt free, but they've not been able to attract significant investment in the meantime.
And people still believe in him. The World Cup is coming still at the minute. And everything is all systems go, as it should be with the World Cup organisers, because they can't just say, oh, we'll stop it for a bit and then wait and see what happens. Teams are coming over, hopefully, in October and November to compete for 3 World Cups, which have been everywhere in the past week. They were at Wembley. They were outside number 10 Downing Street, where some blonde fella was stood next to them.
I think he was emptying the bins.
Was the cat? The cat was there.
Were they on the open top bus?
I don't know. I saw the Super League trophy was on the open top bus, wasn't it? There's some interesting sights on the open top bus. Oh, Cold War Steve doesn't see them. The World Cup is going on. I know some people weren't happy with the fact that it was at 10 Downing Street, and we all have.
They've only put 25 million quid into it, though.
Yeah, we all have our opinions on the Prime Minister, and it is what it is. There's a lot of political clout on this World Cup, so there you go. It is what it is. But it's been promoted. People can see it, and we still don't know what's going to happen with Australia or whatever. But we have to plan for the World Cup to go ahead, with them or not. And I still don't buy into this argument. All right, so for us, sticking asterisks next to it, whatever, doesn't matter. For people outside, they don't know. People who bought tickets to the Rugby Union World Cup, as I said the other year, they didn't know. People who go to the pub every February for the Six Nations, they don't know. They don't know any of these players are. They're just going to the pub because it says Six Nations, come watch here. The cricket thing that's starting this week, the 100, which could be one of the biggest shambles in the history of sport, or the saviour of cricket. It could be up there with Alan Stanford's Super Series. You all remember that with his helicopter
delivering by helicopter.
Yeah, with all those cricketing legends, Ian Botham, Viv Richards, they're all still there going, yeah, this is great, it's the best thing ever. And where's he now? I think he's still in prison somewhere. But so we will know if it's not proper Australia. But as Steve Mascord said, proper Australia went there necessarily in 1995, and that was the best World Cup ever. So it is what it is.
I think there's a lot of debate about this, but the fact is, when you've got the British Grand Prix, when you've got the Open Golf, when you've got Wimbledon, when you've got touring cricket teams, when you've got the Olympics, which as I saw on the news the other night, lots of people in green and gold were getting off a plane to go to the Olympics. I understand the issues that the NRL have at the moment in keeping their competition going, and they've had to move all of their teams to Queensland, and they look over here and see the infection rate. Sport is going ahead, and what the World Cup organisers have proposed for the players is the best bubble that the England the ECB provided for the Indian cricketers. They're also looking at charter flights, at methods of quarantine when they go back to Australia that might include putting them all in resorts, so all paid for by the World Cup. As a body, I don't think the World Cup can do any more. In terms of should it go ahead, it has to go ahead. Firstly, because it has its allocated slot, and I'm not sure that moving it to next year is helpful in any way whatsoever in terms of competing with the Football World Cup. Also, I genuinely don't know what state the sport is going to be in here if we wait another year to have it. I know that if we have it at the end of this season, it could just be the boost and the fillip that we absolutely need to at least think about how we move forward. And I think the other thing that is clearly an issue that the NRL are going to have to solve is that while some people are briefing against it, notably Phil Gould, and the bloke who I think deserves the most derision at the moment because he's worked over here on a World Cup and he knows how important it is Blake Solly. And whilst I understand that a lot of the players, particularly those from New Zealand, have barely been home, and we're asking them to go home for a couple of weeks and then be away for another 4, possibly 5, and then maybe even be quarantined on the way back. I understand why for an individual player that is an issue. Don't understand why NRL clubs saying if you come back 2 weeks late, that compromises our pre-season. You look at what Trent Robinson has said. Look at what James Tedesco has said. You look at what Jerome Luai has said about wanting to be part of it. How it's going to be really interesting for the NRL whether we think Australia are going to come or not. Trent Robinson has given his players a license to come, and other coaches do. Then there becomes a real difficulty for the NRL in stopping other players that say we want to go from going. Now, clearly the NRL pay their wages, but technically the IRL can demand the release of players for an officially sanctioned tournament. So if the players say they want to go, they will not be in breach of their club contract. And I think, again, the indications are, and I have to say the press conference, the global press conference that John Dutton and Troy Grant did was, in a period where we are desperate for leadership, to hear them talk so positively and confidently about putting on a world-class tournament was music to the ears of anybody who's followed rugby league over the last few years, and they deserve all the backing and support. It may happen, it may not happen for reasons that they cannot control, but to say it's going ahead, absolutely 100% the right thing to do. There's always players injured that don't play in the big tournaments. There's always players out of form that don't get selected. I'm not bothered who comes. I'm just bothered that we have it.
Liam G, who I assume is Liam Gallagher, says, what's to do with promotion and relegation this year? Don't know. We could be like rugby union and just say, we'll have one up and no down, which would bugger up.
Nobody's saying it's changed at this time, but of course, if Toulouse win the championship, they will decide they don't want them to come up. Because this is rugby league.
This is rugby league. If we should call the programme, this is rugby league.
I did ask Mr. Davey that very question. And he said, as far as I know, nothing has changed.
That's the current acting executive, whatever he is, of Super League. The man who's running the competition, as well as he knows.
Yeah, who would clearly be the last person to know if there were any changes.
Give him a ring. You got his number. Kevin was surprised at York's facility up there with the best in Super League. Nice little stadium, isn't it? We've been there for the women's semi-finals. It's good. Michael says the AJ Bell stinks. It's across the river from a waste processing facility. It stinks. That's just a rugby union. So,
that is true, yeah. But it's a good facility. It just smells a lot. Well, it doesn't. Its environment does.
Liam also says Toulouse have more chance than Fev though, surely. Well, yeah, but you can have a derby between Cass and Fev and Wakefield, can't you? So Fev have more away supporters than Toulouse, and as we know, away supporters are the key performance indicator, the key matrix in these things. Speaking of, we spoke about X Factor players and stuff. I was reading the programme I posted yesterday, England versus Wales from '98, which was the rebirth of, or part of the rebirth of the national teams that weren't Great Britain. Does point out Phil Clark as one of the attractive stars of Super League. So there you go.
As indeed he is now with his balanced and measured analysis
on the telly. Oh, big fans of it. I've not watched the TV coverage at the weekend, so I don't know if it was good or not, but I assume it was.
I'm told it was great, but I haven't seen it either.
It's just rugby on the telly. There'll be people on it you don't like. There'll be people on it you do like. I guarantee you, though, there'll be more people on it you like than the football coverage over 2 channels, which was a nightmare to navigate. I think I ended up watching the final on the red button with the 5 live commentary. Mark Chapman doing an excellent job there, as I'm sure he did on the Challenge Cup final as well. I mean, we can go through the results from last week if we want. I have to go onto the Rugby League website because if you just joined us, I went to get the League Express from the paper shop this morning and bought last week's. So I've not read any of the letters page this week, but I'm told it was great. Catalans 27, Leeds 18. So Catalans again. Second half performance, blah, blah, blah.
They were really good. We should not underestimate how good they were. And what they've got that they haven't had in previous years is patience. They don't suddenly panic because they go in 16 points down at half time. They are dominating the way they want to play in the second half, and it's really paying off for them. They've got some hugely talented players. They've got a great balance in their squad, which perhaps they haven't had before. But as a unit, they're looking absolutely formidable at the moment.
And COVID now means they're great away from home as well at home because they had to play all those games here.
Well, they've won, majority of their games away from home this year. They've cured their travel sickness.
Salford beat Wakefield, so back to the moaning and groaning, 24-14.
But again, I think, to be fair to both teams, getting a match on was the biggest priority.
Integrity, Phil.
Wakefield had 7 players, didn't
Integrity, Wakefield. That's our middle name. Integrity.
Well, the thing is, I get that. But if you're saying you've got integrity, you're implying that somebody else hasn't. It'd be very, very interesting to know who Wakefield think don't have integrity.
I think Michael's blocked me. Yes, no, I'm joking. And Wigan beat Huddersfield, so Wigan are great again now because obviously they won it again.
Well, again, scraped past Huddersfield, but the noises coming out of Wigan are buoyant, which I think probably slightly greater than their performances are producing at the moment. But what has gone wrong with Huddersfield? I think we said at the beginning of the year, outside bet for the playoffs with Ian Watson there and some of the recruitment that they'd done. But not only do they seem to be struggling at the foot of the table, but it would appear that the clear out has only just started, and there's going to be massive change there for next season as well.
In the Championship, there was only one game, and that was Batley beating Dewsbury 38-10 in the heavy one in Derby.
No one knew it was on.
Oh.
So going back to our correspondent who said, why isn't there more play? That was played on a Thursday night, and I like to think that I keep an eye on what's happening in rugby league. I had no idea that game was on.
MP Kim Ledbetter, though, she knew it was on because she tweeted about it because Batley won. In League One, whoa, what a set of fixtures. London drew with Doncaster. London scores it 16-all. Friday Night Lights down at the New River. So that sounded like it was exciting. Great result for London. And
best performance of the season, Hugh Richards said in the press box when we saw him on Saturday, who goes to virtually every Scholars game.
There you go. And Coventry Bears, again, Keighley losing to a team like Coventry, 24-18. The Bears, they're having a great season now. I'll put it all down to this programme. So they beat Keighley, and they are still 8th. But they are, 1 point behind Hunslet, and they've got a game in hand.
But they've beaten Hunslet, Keighley and Rochdale, which if you'd said that at the start of the season, you'd have got very long odds. Hunslet, who have just appointed Alan Kilshaw as their new coach.
Who's younger than me. I don't like these coaches when they're younger than me. I think Coventry's travelled to Barrow this week, if that's still on. So that'll be a great test for Coventry's mettle at the minute. I'm sure they will give their all and all that. And in the Women's Super League, of the games that were on this week, because they weren't all on, obviously, Featherstone won the Natalie Harrowell Trophy, beating Bradford 24-12 on Sunday. Cass beat Warrington 48-12 on Sunday afternoon. And last night on Twitch, very, very tight game. Enjoyed watching this one. York beat Wigan 12-4. Close match. It was good. How that leaves the league table, I don't really know. I think Leeds are still top because they obviously, 7 from 7 for Leeds, although they haven't played this week. St Helens second in the table. Their only defeat is one that they forfeited. Wigan and York now both on 10 points. Are those percent? I didn't know if there's win percentages in Women's Super League, but there's now apparently. And Castleford 5th on 4 wins, but they've only played 6 games. Featherstone have played 8. It's the league table's a mess, but we'll see what happens with the Women's Super League. And as we say, big game on Monday, 7:45. Well, they say 7:45, but yesterday they kicked off at 8:10, so I don't know why that was delayed. But Leeds and Saints at Bradford again on their illegal pitch, but disrespectful to the players. Blah, 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 blah. So, that's the game I'm looking forward to most this weekend, because 8 might be on, and B, I've got no idea what any of the other fixtures are. So, I could go on the Our League app, and I've done the predictor, and I think I've tipped Wakefield to beat Wigan. So that's blind faith and panic there. But as you say, there's no point looking ahead to fixtures where they probably, or they might not be, or not probably won't be on that.
Well, they're even talking now that if Castleford aren't travelling to Catalan, can they get maybe Lee or Hull KR there? And Who knows? How can we predict games that we think Huddersfield Hull will be on because it's on Sky? No other game is on Sky from this hemisphere this weekend, so who knows?
Well, at least the Olympics starts this week, so with no fans or anything. Have we not got any Olympic connections? Are the Brownlee brothers not there? They're like rugby.
One of them is.
One of them. Do any other Olympians like rugby league? I don't know. That cyclist didn't do it anymore. So
there's a lot of Paralympians like rugby league, so we'll be looking out for them when their tournament starts. I mean, Hannah Cockcroft was tweeting this week that she'd already bought tickets for the World Cup.
There you go. She's famous. I've seen her on the telly. She's from Halifax.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. She's good at her.
Is there anything else? I think we're done, aren't we? I don't think there's anything else.
No, unless there's any unanswered questions from our good flock.
No, I don't think. I mean, that Fev Toulouse game coming is going to be big. I don't know if Liam's predicting
huge.
So that's again that it's a game.
We need to make something of that. We need to get that shown somehow, even if it is on a free YouTube channel, or if you really want to sell rugby league, the biggest game of the season, you have to get people to see it. We can't go to France and watch it. I really don't think it's going to affect the attendance of French people going to watch it. No. That is the classic example of we have to get that game somehow, even if it's at our own expense, promoting the championship.
Well, you say to the people from the Sportsman who, did the stuff in the early rounds of the Challenge Cup, granted they just took the Our League coverage and stuck their badge on it, but it's still the same thing. Give us the money to pay for some cameras and all the other people that get involved, and it was good.
Or you ring up BN, whose deal so far with Castellan Dragons has come to an end, and say, look, we'll pay you to cover the Toulouse Featherstone game, but in return, would you mind showing some more Catalan matches this year?
I mean, as Liam tells us, it is at Post Office Road, the Millennium Stadium, which you still can't get over. Looking forward to that one. It'd be good. Again, I'm going to have to listen to it on the radio or something. If Fev give their commentary away on YouTube again, I'll listen to them. But we've got to find our own deals for our products and
take our best product and sell it. And if that is going to be Fed against Toulouse, I suspect that Featherstone won't lose out in terms of people that want to see that game live, particularly as they're the 1895 Cup holders. So let's find a way of getting it out there, and then we can talk about it more, because we'll have seen it.
How many times have I said that? The fixtures they have chosen to show from the Women's Super League, some of them have been terrible decisions. But when they pick the right ones, it's good. Leeds Saints could be a blowout scoreline because there's those happening close matches, but chances are on paper it'll be a good one, as would Fev and Toulouse. And if Toulouse won 40-0 or Fev won 40-0, c'est la vie, as they say. But at least the fixture was the right one to choose in the first place. So the good news is we will have a guest at some point soon, because he's got back to me. I've nothing on at the minute, which is worrying, but...
and I think he means that as well, because the last time I spoke to him, he said he was sat on the couch in his pyjamas eating cornflakes.
Is he up here or down there?
He's down there.
We'll have to get him on Zoom then, so that's good. So special guest coming. We might do that later this week, I don't know. Or maybe Monday before the programme. I'll work it out with him. So a special guest coming. That'll be good. Stay tuned for that. Because I'm sure that guest will have plenty of interesting things to say. Yeah, there you go.
Naturally funny.
That's coming up soon. Apart from that, like, share, subscribe. Enjoy your rugby league. And of course, coming up in days, the new issue of 4020. It's I'm going to point again.
Not just the new issue, but a special issue. 84-page 10th birthday issue.
In fact, if people are watching on YouTube right now, I will make it huge, because I've got which picture is it? I can mess around with the things on screen, you see, which you can't see, but the people at home can. Because the picture of me keeps going smaller, but I'll just cover it up with the new issue of the magazine. 10th anniversary issue, 84 pages. There it is. Super League's 10 out of 10, and some pictures of people and stuff. Oh, it's Ben Westwood. As I always say, the best rugby league player from Normanton called Ben. Probably best he's not on social media as well. But, you know, ha 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 ha. So next to your head now, Phil, is the current issue. And another lovely design, because you do look
spine bound as well, with the 84 pages. Challenge Cup supplement from Betfred, for which we're grateful for their support. If you're going to bet Betfred. And hopefully people will enjoy it, because there's lots of stuff. Lots and lots.
Can I just say that's Phil's opinion and not mine? Liam says, how good was the 1895 Cup? Honestly, screaming from my couch in Amsterdam. I've heard about those places, Liam.
It was sensational.
It was. As have you, audience. We'll be back next week, probably on Monday. I don't know. But you're not bothered anyway, because you'll watch whenever. And most people listen to the podcast anyway. Interesting. I looked on the Apple podcast charts, because there's a rugby section. And the people can't see me now because I'm hidden behind the 4020 magazine. I'm not moving it. It's like the top 50 rugby podcast episodes of, and in the top 50, I think there were 3 rugby league episodes, and one of them was us. So, you know, it's not bad. It's all right. You know, we're doing okay.
Take that. We'll take that.
We will. And we'll
any male grooming products that want to advertise with us, because we're in the top 50, feel free.
But unfortunately, we're still behind Brian Moore. There's nothing we can do about that. But there you go. He's more famous than us. Right, well,